Thank you for joining us on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. And here's your host, Chris Cebollero.
Another great episode of the Ultimate Leadership Podcast comes your way. I want to thank you for joining us once again. I'm your host, Chris Cebollero. You know, one of the things that we've got to think about now is that for the next 20 years, 10,000 people a day are going to be retiring. And one of the things that we need to think about, and I think one of the challenges that we have in the workforce today, is we've not equipped the leaders to lead the workforce. Now as the old guard, let's say, starts to leave the workforce and now the new generation comes into the workforce, how are we going to prepare ourselves to be leaders to that new workforce? And, you know, we kind of tongue-in-cheek named this show, Don't Be the Flip Phone of Leadership, and it really was in collaboration with my next guest, and I'm looking forward to introducing her. But one of the things that she's going to share with us is some of those tips that we're going to need to know. And she's got a great competency framework that she's going to share with us on how not to be the flip phone of leadership. And I'm very excited today to introduce our guest, Maureen Metcalf. Maureen is the CEO of Metcalf Associates. She is a renowned executive advisor, author, speaker, and coach who brings 30 years of business expertise to provide high-impact practical solutions that support her clients' leadership, development, and organizational transformation. Maureen designs and teaches MBA classes in leadership and organizational transformation. She hosts her own international radio show focusing on innovative leadership, and she is the author of Innovative Leaders Guide to Transforming Organizations, which was a 2014 International Book Award winner. Help me introduce our good friend, Maureen Metcalf. Maureen, welcome to the Ultimate Leadership Podcast.
Chris, I am so delighted to be here. Thank you for including me in what is such an exceptional show.
Thank you so much. And I got to tell you, I mean, the honor is mine. I mean, when we, you know, one of the things that we do with our guests before shows is we kind of have a little pre-show and we kind of talk about how we're going to entertain the audience and what tidbits can we bring them. And actually, you're the one that came up with the thought or the title of the show, Don't Be the Flip Phone of Leadership. And maybe you could give a little bit to the audience of how you came up with that title.
Sure. Chris, I have worked with leaders for a number of years trying to transform organizations. And I say trying because the range of effectiveness is exactly what we see in the literature, that some are more successful than others. And in part, what I saw was people well-intended, very skilled, moving forward with transformations, and often they weren't changing themselves at the same rate as they were changing their business, and they became the problem. And so I watched them launch programs, and then I watched them be exited. And it's heartbreaking to see people that I care about who were the thought leaders in their field, and because they spent so much time focusing on the work, they lost sight of also focusing on themselves, that as leaders, our craft, what we have to offer is leadership. And if I am not staying current in how I lead, I am likely to get left behind.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing. I mean, we, as leaders, we should be focusing on our workforce. We should be focusing on our organizations. But one of the things that we forget is we forget our own professional development. And now as you start to think about a new workforce coming into the fold and, you know, we start to think about, you know, how we're going to lead them, we really have to focus on our own professional development. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. So I guess, you know, my first question to you is, you know, you heard me in the introduction where we were talking about this changing workforce. Do you have a sense of what the future of leadership needs to look like?
I do. So I worked with Mike Morrow-Fox and Susan Cannon to look at how leadership has evolved over the centuries and define the competency model for what we will need going forward. And this is based largely on developmental psychology and the work of Suzanne Cook-Greuter and Bill Torbert, Jane Lovinger, and all of those who went before them that created this field of study. So for listeners, if you think of Jim Collins' reference to level 5 leaders, he has basically a leadership hierarchy. And when I draw that, I actually draw a series of concentric circles. So it's not going up the ladder necessarily, but I expand my capacity. So I don't lose what I started with, and yet as I go up levels within the organization, I need to be more complex in my thinking, I need to be more emotionally intelligent, I need to manage my behavior more effectively, my time horizon needs to be longer. It's it seems almost intuitively obvious that as I advance in my career, I'm going to need more of that. And as the world is more interconnected now, that things that used to be the purview of a company have now been outsourced. So we're partnering in more significant ways, and those partners are often global. So when I want to make a change to something in my organization, I am often having to collaborate with a number of partners, where in the past I would walk down the hall and tell my CFO to change something. That approach doesn't work anymore because they don't all work for me.
As we now start to think about what the future of organizations look like, we really have to now think of what the future of leadership looks like. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this strategist competency model. And I know that there's 7 competencies in this model. And go ahead and hit us with the first one.
So the first is professionally humble, and this is caring more about getting it right than being right. So if we think about leaders, this is straight from Collins, one of his concepts, and it has held true in the model that Suzanne Cook-Reuter created. And I want to say this was part of her Harvard doctoral work. So that's important to me, that it's well researched. It's not just made up stuff. And so this idea of caring about getting it right, we've all worked with leaders who really cared about looking good and getting promoted and getting whatever it is, more stuff, houses, cars, bonuses. The difference in the strategist is they are really committed to the mission and vision of the organization. And when I work with them, it feels different. And it feels different, therefore I am more engaged and more committed to the vision that we co-create.
You know, I think that one of the things that I took from that is being professionally humble. It really is putting your ego in check. And, you know, leadership isn't about you, and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to have challenges and, give all the credit, take all the blame. I mean, all the things that we heard, but I like how you're saying getting it right rather than being right. And I don't know that we really put a lot of emphasis in there.
It's interesting because as much as I've been teaching this, people still, I think, look for someone who is, quote, leaderly, as someone who doesn't make mistakes. They're physically in stature bigger than other people. They have the right voice and the right presence. And I think we make the mistake that if we're looking for someone to always be right, then they're not experimenting and they're not making the right changes. Right. So I think many of us, while it seems reasonable, humble, of course we would like that, but many people actually don't resonate with people who are too humble. So as followers, we also need to change what we're looking for.
I agree with you 100%. Number 2, what's number 2?
Unwavering commitment to right action. So unstoppable and unflappable when I'm on a mission. And so that, to me, is we set the course. Not that we don't change the course when it needs to be changed, but often as leaders, we're asked to do things that are painful, especially if we're right-sizing an organization or anything, whatever words we put around it. That means that we know people we care about are going to lose jobs. Those things are painful for any good human being, and yet to preserve the organization, often we need to go in a different direction. So there are lots of times that we need to stay the course and do what we know is right, even though it is incredibly hard.
So in that case then, I mean, when we know that we've got to stay the course, I mean, and we feel ourselves veering off, how do we get ourselves back on track?
For me, it's being clear on the objectives and reminding myself, but it's also being surrounded by people who can encourage me. None of us can do this alone. So having
that good network, for me,
sometimes it's in the company. So I have a company president, and he is a beautiful reminder when I kind of meander off the path. We have the relationship where we can do that with one another, right? That I jokingly say I am comfortable being managed.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that we forget is, as leaders ourselves, we don't need to have all the answers. And sometimes it's our peers who actually notice that we may have drifted away, and they're the ones that are kind of correcting and bring us back. So I love how you said that. Number 3?
360-degree thinker. This term comes from Heifetz, another Harvard prof, having a balcony view. And what that really means to me is, again, we talked about companies are now so interconnected. When I make a change to something that would seem minor, I need to understand how that change is going to ripple through the organization. So I need to talk to my stakeholders and my partners and really get their perspective on the things that seem appropriate for my organization may in fact be very different for others. And along with that is the willingness to continually grow, that I balance the competing commitments of these constituents on a regular basis. And I can't know all of that. So I have to be interacting with these stakeholders, again, not from a being right, but help me understand how this is going to impact you. And then let's come to an appropriate course of action that is best for all constituents.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that's important is I don't think we do enough 360-degree leadership. So I really like how you kind of, put that into the bucket of being a 360-degree thinker, because now as you start to set those plans in action, it's not that you're just thinking about your own department, but you may be thinking about different departments or who this decision may touch, which in the end kind of takes us away from any conflict that may arise because we didn't consider that in the past.
And I can't tell you how many people are just too busy, right? And we all are. But I get a whole lot busier when I'm not deliberate and thoughtful up front because I'm fixing.
Yeah, I agree with you. Number 4 in the strategist competency model, Maureen, what do you got?
Intellectually versatile. So if I'm intellectually versatile, I have interest, expertise, and curiosity beyond the job. And again, for folks who are so busy, that may again seem counterintuitive. How could I possibly make time to do other stuff? And yet, let me facilitate a CEO forum, and one of the gentlemen in that group is an avid reader, and one of the things he reads is historical biographies. So as we're in a discussion, he can pull from what did Lincoln do or what did someone else do, and he integrates that into what he's doing today. So he is learning from everywhere, not just from the latest business book. And let me give one more example. I was a participant in a women's African drumming group a few years ago. And let me set the stage. I am a white girl from central Ohio. I did not grow up with African drumming group, and I did not grow up with rhythm. So I was usually the worst one in the group, except we were all from Ohio. So, and what I learned in working with drum masters, we're all doing something, performing, and the person leading the group, not unlike a symphony conductor, would stand in front of me and help me get back on rhythm when I floated off. So not only do I float off in business, but my rhythm will occasionally not be true. And so that person would stay in front of me and not take my instrument away. And so when I think of leadership, I'm balancing all of those people in the performance, and I have to find a way to help them return to course without embarrassing and without distracting other people.
And not letting them lose their instrument, which could be their positions, But I think that you're absolutely right. So I think that there are a lot of great things that, came in that example. And one of the things that I think it even goes back to your, being professionally humble, that we've got to be able to take that direction when we lose our rhythm as well. So I really like how you said that. Number 5?
Highly authentic and reflective, not constrained by personal appearances, but highly focused on personal behavior. So this is the ability at the end of a day or a meeting or whatever to look back at what I did, evaluate it objectively, and discover where I need to change and grow. So for one, I often work with very senior folks who believe that because they have a C in front of their title, that means that they're fully baked. And this idea of reflective and authentic gets more to, in times of change, I'm not baked. I need to be continually growing. I have to have emotional courage and willingness to confront situations where I did something that didn't turn out right. So the idea that I'm always experimenting means I'm always making mistakes, and not mistakes that tank the company, but I don't always get it right the way I would like to. So I'm looking for feedback. Yeah, I would love for people just to say you're right and you're beautiful too. But in reality, I am often harried, not quite right, and willing to learn. And I think that's really the more appropriate stance.
Yeah, I mean, and I love that. And being able to take that stance from the very beginning is really important. I've said that to my workforce a few times in my career. We're going to head in this direction. Is it going to work? I don't know, but we're going to give it a shot. If it doesn't work, we're going to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. One of the stories that I have, Maureen, is I went ahead and changed the training process because this training process was just so long and it was keeping me from getting the resources into the network, to do work. So I went ahead and, got some people and we developed this new training process and I was all excited about it and we rolled it out only to come and find out that it almost doubled the amount of time people were in training. And so we moved it to a competency-based more than a time-based practice. And I had to go back to the workforce and say, this was a mistake. Sorry about that. We're going to have to go back to what we were doing before and then back to the drawing board for something else. But, being able, I think, to be authentic in that situation allows our workforce to know that, hey, we're going to make mistakes too.
Chris, you gave an example when we talked earlier about things you encountered in Ferguson during the crisis. And, often as leaders, we're not in that kind of crisis, but we're facing things that we haven't faced before. And potentially there's not a playbook for some of this stuff. So we are truly making it up as we go along. Now the good news is we're incredibly smart and have lots of good experience, but there's stuff we're going to get wrong.
Yeah. And in my book, Ultimate Leadership, 10 Rules for Success, rule number 7 is experience comes from mistakes and mistakes come from lack of experience. So those are things we just have to learn from. What do you got for us next?
Able to inspire followership. So, jokingly, we talk about leadership a lot, and we don't always talk about how we impact those who follow us, either because they have to, because we pay them, or by choice in some cases. So this is the ability to connect with people at all levels of the organization, create a shared vision, and then implement that. So it's able to understand and manage change, innately able to diffuse conflict without avoiding or sidestepping, but really step in or lean in, whichever phrase we use, and deal with the messiness that comes along with dealing with humans. And sometimes we can do it with humor, and sometimes we have to have difficult conversations.
And I think that that's really important. And one of the things that I got from you was saying connecting with people at all levels. And we've got to remember that, our job isn't that we're the top of the food chain. Our job is we have a specific set of skills that allow us to develop budgets, that allow us to set direction, that allow us to set those. But there are people that are at the lowest levels in our organization that if they weren't there, would cause trouble within our organizations. And we have to remember that we're all members of the team, and we've got to be able to connect with the people at all levels so we can really foster that team environment and not seem like we have a hierarchy or a title-based organization, which a lot of organizations do.
It's an interesting balance because I can't step in inappropriately and undermine people's bosses, but I need to be accessible at some level. And I have mixed feelings about things like open door policies because I've seen people get torpedoed because they walked through one of those open doors, said something that wasn't well considered, and ended up worse off for those conversations. So we have to, as leaders, have a balance for when is the door open and how do we make that a safe journey.
One of the things I think was one of the best tools that was ever created for a leader was Facebook. Now, I've had a lot of my workforce want to become my friends on Facebook, and I've accepted them. I certainly don't go out and ask people to be my friend because I don't want them to feel obligated that they have to, accept my friendship. But when they send me a friend request, I accept. But what it does for me, Maureen, is it allowed me to know who took their kid to his first hockey game. Who was on vacation and the pictures that they, who now moved into their new home. So now I was able to engage that employee when I saw them and say, hey, I saw you took your kid to his first hockey game. How did that go? And it at least allows me to, not circumvent any level of leadership, but just have a normal conversation that allowed me to connect.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant suggestion. One of the frameworks we use is called organizational vibrancy, and it talks about I understand the humans around me and I look for ways to support them. And often we don't do that at work because we're not structured as such. But I do the same thing. I look at who's having family issues, who has aging parents, I commented on yesterday on someone who just moved into a beautiful new home. So it's not taken hours a day. I scan it for 10 minutes a day and that's it.
We've gotten to number 7 of the strategist competency model, and what does that include?
It's innately collaborative. So I welcome collaboration and a quest for novel solutions that can bring a better output than I would have working solo. And this gets back to what we talked about at the beginning, that now as leaders, we are working cross-organizational, cross-boundaries of all sorts, and I can no longer know everything I need to know, so I have to collaborate and bring in multiple perspectives, which also means I'm willing to change how I think about things based on input I get. So it's not bring everyone in the room to tell them I'm right. It's really bring everyone into the room, either physically or virtually. Listen to different points of view, value them. So this is one of the places where diversity comes in, and it's really diversity of point of view, and then being able to synthesize what I hear from multiple perspectives and come up with a solution or an approach that is bigger than any one individual would have had.
And I think that's really important, and I think this is where having a good, solid mentorship network as well, because I can't count the number of times I've gotten on the phone to say, hey guys, I'm dealing with this problem. What do you do? And, it's given me great perspective, not only to hear different advice, but to have a sounding board for my own ideas as well. So, but, you have those people within your organization, but don't forget those people that you respect that are outside your organization that could also lead to you having some perspective as to the decisions that need to be made.
I look for feedback back to our 360 thing. I look for feedback from people who work for me or have in the past, from peers, from bosses, from thought leaders. Not to say I don't know what I'm doing, because I think I know a lot, but there's a ton I don't know. And in an effort to bring the best possible solutions to any situation, I want to reach out to people who have a perspective that I have not considered.
And one of those things that we talked about earlier too, Maureen, was our own professional development. And professional development doesn't necessarily define as I've got to take a class or I've got to read a book. As you now interact with these people, your professional network, your mentors, even in the 360-degree thinker realm, this is professional development.
You and I both do these interviews, and what I found, I've done over 100 hours of interviews now. I've learned a ton. I couldn't pay to get access to all these people. I couldn't go to enough classes. But each week I get to listen to people, and I put it in a couple of buckets now. I can learn a skill. I can have a career focus. And then the third, and the one that I value most, especially as we're talking about preparing for Leader 2050 or preparing for the boomers to retire, is I can learn a lot from those people retiring and from a lot of other people that helps me be wiser. So I'm learning the history for how we got here, exactly, and the oral stories and things that I wouldn't have considered before. So I think for listeners, it's important to think about not only skill development and career advancement, but also that kind of innate judgment that only comes with this kind of development.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I love investing my time into this show, as I know that you do, and we've kind of worked together on each other's show. And we give up our time, so we're able to share knowledge, bring experts into this realm, and just have a discussion about what's best practice. And I really love that, and I love how you said that. So let me go and ask you this last question, Maureen. So now that you've outlined these 7 competencies, And we now add this to our leadership library, our leadership experience. How does it benefit us as leaders to use this strategist competency model?
So there's some, again, I keep pointing to research because I think it validates what I believe. There's some interesting research. It was a small sample set, but still really insightful in that leaders who were able to successfully transform large, complex organizations consistently tested at strategist level, or they worked with consultants who did. So the benefit to a leader is if I'm running a large, complex organization and even more transforming it, I will benefit significantly from demonstrating not only the behaviors, but also the mindset behind it. So if I'm collaborating, but saying to myself, I know these people are a bunch of morons, I'm not really getting what I'm trying to. If I truly believe that I need input from multiple people because I don't know everything, so connecting back to humility, then I will be more successful and my organizations will be more successful. And in a time of turmoil in our world, for all kinds of reasons. In some cases, we're solving big medical problems. So not that it's all bad, but in a time of uncertainty, we need leaders who can step up and add sanity to what we're facing and really help us effectively transform.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. So, Maureen, I appreciate you joining us. It was a great show. And if there's people out there that want to learn more about the strategist competency model or may want to engage with you, what's the best way they can do that?
So there are a couple things. If they want to read the content, go to the website, www.metcalf, and that's spelled METCALF, associates.com. There's a thought leadership section and it is full of information. There are free assessments on the right-hand navigation bar. And part of what we've tried to do is make a lot of these tools available at no cost because not everyone can afford you and I. We both write for Forbes, and those are listed in the thought leadership section. And if you're interested in working with me, my email address is Maureen at the same place, metcalf-associates.com, or you can go to the Contact Us button on the website, or you can go to Facebook, Innovative Leaders Driving Thriving Organizations. So I am pretty accessible.
Man, you're just all over the place. But Maureen Metcalf, I want to thank you for joining us, and please promise you're going to come back so we can have another discussion about leadership.
Chris, thank you. Again, it's an honor to be here, and I love our conversation, so you won't be able to get rid of me.
Awesome. And for everybody out there, we're going to put the wraps on another great episode of the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your comments, and continue to send us your suggestions about shows. I love reading those emails, and I answer every single one. Until next time, this is Chris Saballero, and I look forward to chatting with you again real soon.
Thank you for joining us. The Ultimate Leadership Podcast is a production of chrissaballero.com. You can interact with us by email at ultimateleadership16@gmail.com. All rights reserved.